I guess it's community water here. As brought out, my name is Robert Stratton. I'm the Whatcom County Membership Chair. I'm also the Sergeant of Arms for this event. The easiest job in the world. You guys have been wonderful. I'm a member of Whatcom County Open Carry. We got a table down over there. If you have any questions, Tim and John are more than happy to help. I'm a prolific poster on opencarry.org. I quickly got a reputation from some of the more statist members of that forum. They'd call me names such as confrontational, anarchist, radical, extreme. I used to be offended. I am no longer. I wear those terms as a badge of honor. And I think anybody who is standing up for civil rights, no matter what it is, should not be offended when people are calling you names, because you are doing something right. To me, open carry is the most libertarian method of exercising the right to bear arms. Because let's face it, when we ask the government for permission to do anything, marry whom we choose, travel where we want to, start a business, want good food, the government is not considering it a right anymore, and we need to fight against these things. I was asked to talk about the Second Amendment or the right to bear arms, obviously, but I'd like everybody who are Washington residents to look up our state constitution, Article 1, Section 24. This was written at the height of progressivism in the federal level, and our constitution was kind of written as an anti-progressive constitution, and it's why it has very strong protections for our right to bear arms, for our right to privacy. I hope all of you are reading the Libertarian Party state website at lpwa.org. If you have, you know that my position is that Constitution and governments give us no rights. They can only be taken away by force or coercion. And firearms is the most common way of exercising the right to bear arms, but it is an extensive right. Guns aren't the only way of bearing arms. But why should libertarians care about the right to bear arms? I think when I'm preaching to this crowd, most of us know it's not about hunting. And of course, the history of the Second Amendment shows this to be true. Because when the British colonists came here, they came here with a written constitution that already had the right to bear arms in it. And of course, this was to protect against Catholic rulers, because the majority of them were Protestant. But over the centuries, they developed into a common law right. And that's what the founders were fighting against. They felt that their British rulers were ignoring their rights as Englishmen. Also, most of the founders were educated people in Europe at that time studied the ancient writings, including that of Aristotle. And Aristotle saw the right of bearing arms as a check on tyranny. Matter of fact, he said when speaking of oligarchs and tyranny, that both mistrust the people and therefore deprive them of their arms. But I think too that the history and the right to bear arms goes back even further than that. Matter of fact, most of human history, I don't doubt you will find a time where people weren't bearing arms or arming themselves. And speaking to a friend of mine about the right of bearing arms being a fundamental right, and he's from India, a Punjabi person, and he told me something that I found kind of profound. He said, before we had the ability to speak, humans were arming themselves. And that got me to thinking, because in reality then, the right to bear arms is just an extension of what is already our natural right, to feed ourselves, to protect ourselves from wild animals, from criminals, and from oppression, from tyranny. And when the Bill of Rights was written, there wasn't much debate on the Second Amendment. Both the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists realized that this was a fundamental right, and they put it in there with not much ado at all. Even though the Federalists thought, we don't need a Bill of Rights because, hey, we will never go past the enumerated powers granted us, and we know how well that worked out. So thank God we had the libertarian-minded Anti-Federalists who helped us in that regard. And they gave us the Second Amendment, which says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now this is a simple, easy to understand sentence. Even elementary kids understand it, as written. But it's even better when you understand some of the terms and the definitions of these terms at the time of the writing. Like regulate simply meant to make regular. It did not, as our government would like us to believe, mean impose restrictions upon. For instance, if you had a clock that the time was off, you would regulate your clock. If you went to shoot your firearm and you noticed it was off, you would regulate your firearm. Also, we had the term militia, which is much discussed nowadays, what that means. But for this definition, what we can do is we can turn to the Virginia Constitution, which was written before the United States Constitution. And it defines militia right in their right to bear arms. And it says that a well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained to arms is the proper, natural, and safe defense of a free state. Very simple. What is a militia? It's all of us carrying our arms. And I like it because he recommends the Lockean natural law theory, where they say it's the proper and natural. We can also get decisions on how some of the judges in the past viewed our rights. There's one case, it's a horrible case, it's a Dred Scott case, which denied African American citizenship. And the reason why they did this is because the bigoted judges stated in their decision that if they were to grant them citizenship, they would have the right to enter every other state whenever they pleased, and would give them full liberty of speech in public and in private upon all subjects upon which its own citizens might meet, to hold public meetings upon political affairs, and to keep and carry arms wherever they went. And sadly, we know that decision was faulty because it believed only citizens have these rights. As libertarians, we know this is, everybody has the rights. And it also was sad because it said if you were from a certain ethnic background, you weren't a citizen. We can glean more information from cases like Nunn v. State. It was a Georgia Supreme case in 1846. And Georgia was trying to ban pistols, and the judges in that case said, the right of the whole people, old and young, men, women, and boys, and not militia only, to keep and bear arms of every description, not merely such as are used by the militia, shall not be infringed, curtailed, or broken in on, in the slightest degree. And all this for the important end to be attained, the rearing up and qualifying of a well-regulated militia, so vitally necessary to the security of a free state. So again, as we can tell from these decisions and the definitions of the words, the Second Amendment simply means what it says, that the population, knowledgeable in the use of the arms, that their right should not be infringed. But what happens when people's arms are taken away? Well, unfortunately, the 20th century is full of examples. And of course, gun enthusiasts will talk ad nauseum about them. Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, all of these tyrannical dictators and countries disarmed their civilian population before the terrors that they put upon them. We know too that the United Nations has engaged in a long-time mission of disarming civilian populations. One of the things in the news lately is their UN arms treaty. But this isn't a new thing. They've been trying this for decades. In '93, they were successful in doing this. In Rwanda, they disarmed the civilian population. But the UN does not disarm government, military, or police. So in '94, the Hutu-led government went on a massacre spree. And they murdered and mutilated lots of people. And the only reason they were able to do this was because government soldiers and policemen stood behind the people doing these horrible crimes. But you might think, what would our government do? You want to think our government is more enlightened. But again, we have history to show us what it does. Look what it did to the indigenous populations of this land over the years when they disarmed them. As we can see in the Dred Scott decision, Look what it did to those of African descent and the subjugation and the problems that people of that ethnic background had to endure. We can also look how our government acts in foreign lands where they believe the constitutional restraints don't restrain them. And in places like Iraq or any other country that they've occupied, they don't respect the fundamental rights of the people there. And you may argue, and you might have a point, that our country is at war in Iraq, so it doesn't apply. And I will counter this. If your country is trampling on your rights and is disarming you, it's at war with you. But why should we care about the right to bear arms? If we know it's not for hunting, and we know that we feel safe in our homes, we live in safe areas, we're not going to get mugged. Because the right to bear arms in the Second Amendment was written specifically to protect us against oppression. And we have examples of this in the United States. The Battle of Hayes Pond, the Lumbee Indians were a minority group. The Ku Klux Klan in 1958 was going to cause them problems, and the Lumbee Indians, because they took up arms, both guns and sticks, were able to thoroughly rout the KKK. And only after they did this did the local government condemn the actions of the KKK. They didn't do it prior. And then also in Athens, Tennessee, shortly after World War II, the locals there, mostly veterans, were able to thwart an entrenched oligarchy who were rigging the elections and wreaking havoc on the local community. And another point I'd like to bring out is a militia group in Southwest, I can't remember which state it was exactly. This was like maybe 2 years ago. And the Occupy Wall Street were having their protests. And the militia group heard about the police coming in and were going to disband the Occupy people from exercising their right of free speech. They stood up and stood between the police and the group. They didn't agree with the Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street didn't agree with them. I don't agree with either group of those people, but I believe they exercised their fundamental rights properly in that instance. So I'm not a violent, coercive person. That's probably why I'm a libertarian. But I believe the right to bear arms is important because it means we use whatever tool necessary to protect what comes naturally. It goes back to that statement that my Indian friend had said. Our freedoms and our liberty is most important. And I would urge all of you to do whatever you can. Pick a fight that promotes individual liberty, something that's dear to you, and fight it. Fight for it strong. Do whatever you can for it. It's because if people start calling you names, they start calling you confrontational, anarchist, or radical, or an extremist, know that it's good to confront something that is wrong. Know that it's good to work for anarchism or limited government. Know that it's good to be radical, because by its very definition, only radicals further liberty. And it's good to be extreme when society or government has moved liberty and freedom so far away. By de facto, they're extremists too. So we must stand up for our rights, the ones we believe in, but also stand up for the rights of others, even if we disagree with those rights, and we might find them distasteful. Because when we win rights for others, only then do we win them for ourselves. So even if you don't carry any arms, support those who do. And the principle behind it, the right to resist and the right to protect against oppression, the right to remain free.